Welcome to Big Hearted Indy, the Citizen 7 podcast about genuine friendship, big-hearted service, and forming whole leaders in Indianapolis. Join your hosts Greg Enas, Don Palmer, and Chris Spangle every episode as they sit down with men who are building, mentoring, serving, and leading across our city. If you want deeper friendships, a clearer sense of purpose, and practical examples of leadership shaped by service, you're in the right place. Welcome to Big Hearted Indy. My name is Chris Spangle. We're so glad you're here. We've got a very fun episode for you today. You may have heard these guys here in the podcast feed or on the YouTube channel. One thing about the podcast feed and YouTube channel is, yes, there's Big Hearted Indy. That's our main podcast. But then we're starting to mix in some event audio and video. And we also have some special podcasts, and one of them is Honor God in the Grind. And we have the two hosts here, Kelley and Jackson Troxel, are with us. And I've enjoyed producing those and getting to meet you both through that. You're both stellar young men. And Greg, also young man.
Stellar, too.
Stellar?
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
And so we're missing Don today. Don's on a secret mission that we'll tell you about later. But Greg, why don't you tell us about Jackson and Drew and why we're talking to them today?
Well, indeed, I count myself less than stellar compared to these two young men here in their 30s, family men who love Jesus, who love their wives and kids, who've cut their teeth in the software industry from different perspectives and have experienced God in the grind. And we're going to explore what the grind is that we as a community face in our own lives and what it means to really experience God and his power and to go through him oftentimes in hard, messy situations, but to see our faith and trust grow in him. And so it's a joy to have you, Drew, and Jackson here. Jackson and I go back many years. Drew and I go back many months, but each of them have a special place in my heart. And you're going to be hearing more from them as we end this episode with what they have planned for us as a community going forward in the future. So with that, Drew and Jackson, why don't we start off just by each of you sharing a bit of your story, your upbringing, how you were groomed and formed in life, and then conclude with how you guys connected, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you so much, Greg, for inviting us. I mean, just feels so easy to hang out and talk with you. So thanks for just having so much joy, so much energy, and being a stellar leader. And yeah, like you said, we only know each other for about a year, but it's been a huge blessing. So thank you. I guess just for me, I think background wise, born in Indianapolis. So I was born in Methodist Hospital downtown. My mom had a small house in Zionsville where I lived as a baby, and I live there now as well as an adult, but there was a lot of life in between. We moved to California when I was 2. My parents were in the ministry, actually. So my dad was a preacher, graduated from seminary, and my mom was a worship pastor, actually. So she would play guitar, my dad would preach, and I would do the lyrics. That laminated paper would get on the wall. Everybody can, so I would change them out. So that was my role at the church.
Yeah.
We did different small town churches in Indiana, Oklahoma, California. And so I definitely grew up in like a really encouraging, Bible-based home. Have 3 little sisters. So, and we all live in Indianapolis together. 2 of them are actually due with their first babies this fall, within weeks apart. So we're really excited to be an aunt and uncle. Which brings me to my wife, Megan. We met in college, at Marian University. So in Indianapolis. So moved to Indianapolis, as an adult in 2010, I guess you could say, for college. And I've been here ever since. But the journey for me, like I think growing up as in the church, and then getting the chance to be a teenager and be in my 20s, I definitely tried out all the different lifestyles, you could say, just learned through just making mistakes a lot. I think from a community standpoint, there was some opportunities for improvement from where I grew up in a small town, like our church. After my parents got out of the ministry, we kind of had to do some church bouncing a little bit. So I had to figure out kind of like what my personal journey looked like with God. And in college, I wasn't doing a good job of that. But I think what happened was just being around the right people and really kind of listening to wiser people than me. Like my parents obviously were still like keeping in touch on, hey, like you partying too much in college? You actually doing what's right? Like trying to like, keep that going. I think meeting my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, also changed things. I took things a lot more seriously, right? Who am I as a man? Like what matters? And really at that time, all that mattered to me was sports. I just wanted to I played baseball in college at Marian. And then I actually had to make a pivot in my life where I was like realizing I wasn't a very good baseball player. And so but I also wanted to stay on campus because I just met my wife, Megan, right? We were dating for only 6 months. And so I was like, hey, how am I going to, stay here and still feel like I have purpose to be on campus? And I actually randomly, in some ways, God prompted me to, which sounds weird, but to try out for the football team, which was actually a really important thing to share just because there was a lot of questions about my identity and what do I like. There was some just weird things happened to me as a kid in sports where I was like frustrating with either coaches and just like I cared too much. Like it was like too much of my identity, where it was like something that I wasn't really happy with yet, but I loved it. Like I loved competing and everything. The long story short on that was that we ended up winning the national championship that year. I traveled for the team and I went, traveled with the varsity. We went on the road. We played the national championship down in Rome, Georgia, which is NAIA, and got it, completed my sports kind of journey with a national championship ring, which was a very exciting kind of finish. And then I felt like, okay, now I can work on school and things that really matter. So,
may I interject? Did you make sure that President Dan Elstner and Ken Britt know that you brought Marian to national prominence?
Maybe Dan might know my name, but we don't, I was definitely not like a major contributor to the team by any means. So no, I think Marian was great and it's growing like crazy. He's like completely crushing it. But going into like the career side, I think Indianapolis, I'm excited for the Speed City event coming up on August 11th, because truly I believe that because of Indianapolis, all my dreams have come true. The dreams that I had as a kid of like, working in the innovative industry, which is for me, it's technology and software, which was how Jackson and I met. Been doing that for the last 11 years. But also just meeting people in the city that really kind of take me up on coffee. Like, hey, let's meet up for coffee. Hey, let's go for a run. Hey, let's get lunch. Like, I was really surprised how easy it was to just meet people. Yeah. And I think the Musselmans were in my friends here, they were on here talking about the access in Indianapolis.
Right.
And is like pretty hard to beat like in the whole country because but then you also have, forget the other word they said, but it was like, very high level city with a lot of high level access for people like us in our 20s. Yeah. And I think that accelerated and picked up the speed of like my career, right? Learning through different challenges that I had, learning about what, choices to make with different jobs, and just having that confidence build up as a younger person, that was really key for us. Cause then we actually, when we got married, 12 months later, had our first baby, 15 months later, had our second baby, had to buy a house. Like in my 26, 27-year-old life, like I had a lot of questions, like this moving really fast. So people around the city, like this, whether it's in church or in the community, just edge mentoring was a big deal for me. And just getting that access was like incredible momentum for me as a man. I think that's led to a lot of the reasons why I'm very thankful for my life today.
What a great entree, Drew. Well, Jackson, how about you, my brother?
Yeah. Grew up in Northwest Indiana on a dairy farm. LaCrosse, Indiana is what I claim as my hometown. It's near Valparaiso.
Great basketball gymnasium.
Yeah. Small school. The gym was almost on Hoosiers, one of those.
Really?
In the running, but it didn't end up happening. And growing up, I grew up on a dairy farm, had 3 older brothers. My dad was also a large animal vet. He was a lay minister in our church. And also my mom helped run the vet practice, helped run the farm, helped raise us, obviously, and then also worked in a family business that her father started in the automotive repair industry. So, growing up in that context, it would maybe be deemed as the middle of nowhere, but my parents had a really hospitable lens where even through my dad's veterinary business, he viewed it almost as a ministry to bring people. We hosted people from all different countries, and whether that was students stateside through Purdue or even Ivy Tech or other like vocational schools, or people from Romania or Jordan, or we had exchange students that would spend extended periods of time. It just opened our context, I think. And as a youngster, I was kind of chasing my big brothers in a way. I think, as part of Honor God in the Grind, we talk about identity, we talk about the pursuit. And I think in a lot of ways, I was chasing acceptance, to fit in, to be seen in how I could achieve things. Like, for example, how well I would scrape the cow lot or milk cows. And that's kind of silly, but in a way, it shaped this competitive spirit just to want to be the best in every way, every facet. And I've had to like find outlets for that temper it in some ways and unleash it in others. And I think what I am grateful for is just how my parents created an environment to be in and doing work. And even, like at third grade, doing things that I feel like helped give me exposure and freedom to responsibilities that other adults were doing, that were kind of cool, operating heavy equipment. So in some ways, in a small town, I feel like it was just a sandbox. So in high school, I was pretty involved, 3-sport athlete, class president, student council, 4-H, leadership. And in most of those were just opportunities that if you wanted it, it was there. And on paper, it helped stand out a little bit. So I actually was able to receive a full-ride scholarship going to Purdue. And it just opened up an entire opportunity where I could be just fully present at Purdue. At Purdue, I studied a few different things, but graduated with 180 credit hours and was involved with 5 to 6 student organizations at a given time. And when I graduated, here I was, this class of 27 graduating students in my high school class. And then obviously at Purdue, a different context, was named the graduating student leader at Purdue. And I think not as like, it sounds like a brag, but I think the context there was like, it became this smaller pond. And if you were just kind of stepping into it, it kind of became this maximizer of, I just want to make the most of it. But there were so many idols attached to that of needing to achieve, needing to be seen, needing to get a certain grade, needing to be in a leadership position. And I think I've spent a lot of the last decade and a half since being in Indy, like almost shedding myself of that. And I guess maybe just to split and go to the chapter of landing in Indy, thought I was going to go back to the family farm, do something in dairy processing, even went to South Dakota to make cheese and ice cream, which was kind of a fun little detour my junior year of college.
Is that like the mecca of cheese making in America? Or
that's Wisconsin.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, what's the Mount Rushmore of the cheese?
I mean, that's
South
a great
Dakota,
question.
that's a little, you got to come up with a combo there.
The Mount Rushmore of cheese, I mean, you can't hardly beat just a solid cheddar cheese in my mind. And
well, since you asked me, let me tell you.
Yeah, go ahead. What would you put on there?
I just had to bring this up. You ever had the Bella Vitano cheese blocks? Like the Merlot dipped or Parmesan dipped or whiskey bourbon. Oh my gosh, you got to get that, man.
That's
and
next
plus
level.
You feel so legit when you go up to like the cheese section of Kroger or like something like that. You know what to go get. I mean, that's kind of like a chip on your shoulder, right?
So,
but I'll text it to you.
The bouginess of cheeses there is, from cheddar to whatever.
Bella Vitano.
Come on,
man.
Vitano. I'm noting that.
I had French onion soup for lunch just for the cheese. So thank you for your service. So you were in South Dakota, and then how did you end up in Indianapolis?
Yeah, that was just a summer internship. That's where they invented cookies and cream ice cream, by the way.
Okay.
At
All right.
South Dakota State University. But the Orr Fellowship, in short, it was the only non-ag-related job. Thought it would be good to get some experience not working for my dad and on the farm. And remember telling my host company, the Orr Fellowship is a 2-year program designed to kind of stop the brain drain and equip future leaders of the city, business leaders, entrepreneurs. And I remember telling my host company CEO that, hey, this is a 2-year thing. And after that, going to go back to the family farm. And God just knows everything. And it's so funny to look back at plans, but can just see that door naturally closing through a number of circumstances. And, we're still here. So from 2013, being in the city, ended up doing the Orr Fellowship, a couple of years in venture capital, worked with Drew at Springbuk, a tech company, worked at a tech company called Multiply for 5 years, leading sales and marketing. And then kind of this next chapter of building a business. And then so thankful that life isn't just defined by work. My wife, Paige, and our 2 kids, Truett and Haven just feel really fulfilled by the reality of how grounding it is to come home, or to the fact that they don't really care about what I do. I know that it does matter, but also it's super freeing to know that, they love me regardless of what wins I'm putting on the board. It's motivating to put wins on the board, but yeah, it's also an example of the Father's love for us, that it's not, based on what we do and our achievement. Just like when Jesus was baptized before his ministry began, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." How awesome that out of that love we can work, we can do whatever we do in a way that, that is already like an anchor staple in our lives.
Absolutely.
To build from.
So you guys met in the industry.
Yes, we did.
Met at Springbuk. Shout out to Rod Reason.
Yeah.
From around here. Phil Daniels and the gang. What a
great
time.
guys.
But met in the industry. What has kept your friendship alive? Did it lay dormant for a while, or have you always been growing closer and closer as friends? And ultimately, as you've experienced various grinds in your life, has a little bit of that brought you even closer together now? Tease that out a bit for us.
I think I first met Jackson when he was working at the VC firm. Remind me what
Hyde
that
Park
was.
Venture Partners.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was working at a company that was the first high alpha portfolio company launched. It was called Sigster. I was one of the first 5 people there. So we had some interesting kind of access. You go up to the top floor of the high alpha building, and Jackson's in there looking really smart with this, looking exactly like he looks today with a laptop.
Smart.
I thought you were with a 3-piece suit on and a tie and
monocle. That's not something
Thank
people
goodness
wear,
we weren't doing
those
that.
kinds of, yeah. But I think we just kind of like mingled a little bit. I was one of those like loud, obnoxious 25-year-olds talking to everybody, I think that's kind of how we first met. And then the Springbuk opportunity was really cool because, like you said, really great founders, really kind of built on faith as a foundation, I think, too. And it was recommended to go like take a look at what they were doing. I had no idea what the product was, and nobody would even know if I explained it. But it was basically a combination of data analytics, healthcare, insurance, employer health. It's like, okay, whatever. I just know that everybody here is really awesome, and I want to work with them. And then that's when Jackson and I met. I think the coolest memory I have working with you, though, is when we went to the QBR, which was like a quarterly review of basically at that time, our whole company, right? Which was like 80 people. We drove down to Louisville, I think, or was it? Cincy. Okay. Yeah. And we got to be in the car together for 2 hours there and back, and just like being authentic about where we are with our relationships with our wives. We just recently were married, just like really learning like how to surrender our lives now a little bit differently than just being like the go-getter, single, not married, doing whatever we want, college, to like, okay, like what's, a man look like? What do I need to be doing as a husband now? Like, different mistakes that we've made, like just questions that we had. I think that kind of conversation for 4 hours could last forever, right? We could see each other when we're 60 and we're gonna be like, hey, what's up, man? Like easy to talk. Like, I think that's what that brotherhood kind of connection is, one example. But obviously throughout the day-to-day at work, we would just be like, hey, like we just have that spiritual connection. I think that bond really matters more than just how often do we hang out after work. It was more about like that spiritual bond.
Wow.
One of the things Drew is really amazing at is getting people on board to what he's involved in. And when he made the move to Springbuk, I think a lot of people caught their attention, and he helped build the talent pool. So he was obviously founding sales team at Sigster and helped that company really get off the ground, which was a compelling story for your career. And then truly Springbuk became this, like, the cultural piece was the selling factor. People came to be a part of the team. And I think that was just kind of a testament, regardless of what the what would have been. It was just a really meaningful who factor. I remember a cringe moment through Springbuk when I was interviewing. It's like, who cares what seat you're on when you're on a rocket ship to the moon? And I cringe at that because, like, in a way, there's just this paradigm. You can overweight so much to the who that you don't care about the what, and you can feel like a fish out of water. And obviously you don't want that either, because, we all are like balancing that. But one of the things with Drew is he exemplifies how you can actually be really cool, but also be anchored in your faith in a really authentic way. And I think that's kind of a really good example of, like you can serve God and have a platform, and it doesn't have to be some massive platform, but just showing who God is through your life. And when you started Honor God in the Grind, you invited me to be a part of the first episode. And just in prep for that, we probably had 4 or 5 conversations. And to your point, Greg, about whether it lay dormant our friendship, I would say always friends with you, but it just gave us a new way to go deeper in a hurry. And we were wrestling like, wow, these are so many similar topics of, how we're seen, how we find our worth. Really, what does the grind mean? Because when Drew asked me to be a part of this launch podcast, I was sitting on this seat with Dante and Troy. And it was like, grind to me has this like oil and water connotation. Cause like in some ways I want to like run after the grind and be excited about the grind, but also we've worshiped the grind so much in our culture that it almost is distasteful. So like, what do you mean about honor God in the grind? So Greg, when Drew asked me to be a part of that, it almost became like a deeper sense of we get to define the grind. We get to like, even through this podcast, we've almost landed on a tagline. I would say it's a working tagline.
Well, share it with us.
But yeah, we explore how our work matters for eternity, but it isn't our identity.
Yep.
Our work doesn't define us. So our work informs what we do, but it is not what we do. And I think that spectrum of how we can be running in community, learning together, growing together, and it also like includes what's happening at home. Because I think so much we strip out like the accolades and milestones in business and that measuring stick of where our company is from like revenue or profit. But then like you don't see what's happening at home either. And Mark Batterson has this line, which I aspire to, and I don't get right many times, but I want to be famous in my home. And I think if we are crushing it in business and, we're in all the circles that are, prestige and access, but then like our home life is in shambles, like, man.
Yeah.
For what?
Yeah, totally. Let me expand on that. We got almost.
Oh, no. We got time. Go.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say
30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to just share how this kind of grind situation got brought together. I mean, Don, who's not here, I just got coffee with him. We had a couple things in common, like his granddaughter and my daughter are in the same class at school. Awesome. They're friends. And, I think he gave me this assignment. It kind of felt like, and the first time I ever kind of sat down with him one-on-one, which this whole idea of like, I had this topic of, I didn't call it honor God in the grind. I called it, God cares about your job, or I said like fill in the blank. Like at the time I was working for a startup. So I said, God cares about your startup. And I had different categories of how to break down ways to be encouraged every day when there's so much unknown, and how to be faithful in different categories. Like the categories were how, every day you have an opportunity to either create something, have the chance to transform and change, which is renewal of our heart and renewal of our minds. And then growing, and then also loving, which was kind of like, it could be loving, could be serving, could be partnership. But those 4 things were like, okay, I might not hit my numbers today, if you will, but I'm going to do those something like that. And all 4 of those things, God is a beautiful creator and inventor of. Right. And there's all the Bible is kind of a love story, and we go in there and learn about different ways that people have changed or grow or, creating. Obviously, those are all things that God. So I just shared that kind of blurb, if you will, with him. He's like, you're going to do this. We're going to do a community. Like we're going to have the chance to meet with people in person. And then you maybe have like a little podcast. And I was like, wow. And then that invited the Holy Spirit in to kind of like change me and, prompt me even more than I was expecting, just because, okay, you're going to have the chance to talk about it. Do you actually do this, Drew? Do you actually honor God in the grind? Do you actually surrender your life? And do you actually have, to your point, what you would say, successful home? Are you actually, it's like when you get that assignment. And I think Jackson and I, when we talked, the more that we talked, it was like, wow, okay, this is like so much alignment. We need to do this together because we see it the same exact way. And I think we've learned through every episode different ways to actually redefine our relationships with work, but also the chance for people to be transparent and vulnerable potentially about how hard it actually is to be in the grind.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I reflect on the word grind, I just wanted to kind of describe it. I think this, for me personally, I've been struggling with the reality, if you will, of what's actually happening in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people actually struggle with that because there's chasing the dollar every day, right? Like working for the man, if you will, or like there's just so much, I think, truth being revealed in our life today, whether it's just more consumption of data and facts or just more of a multiplication of people asking hard questions. But there can be oftentimes days where it's like really hard to be motivated and really hard to just shut up and do the work because I'm thinking about lots of different factors in whether it's just like the big picture or it's just like today I just really don't want to do this because like I'll have times where I may like get, I don't know if I would call it lazy, but I get really content. And I think that's good. But I also got to make money, like it's really that hard balance of achieving, but not for the affirmation from the world. And I think that's been really tough to balance. And for me, I'm not with people as much as I'd like to be. I'm not in an office, if you will. So I work remote. I'm an individual sales rep, right? So people in that kind of role spend a lot of time alone. And sometimes you just like don't want to do anything and you technically can choose to not do anything because nobody's watching you.
That's right.
So that's my grind, right? Like, I think everybody's got their own version of it, but regardless, I think those kinds of topics and open forums and questions, everybody's got the chance. I want people to feel like they have the chance to talk about that and they don't have to be, a certain title or a certain level of person. That's great to learn from people like that. But also, I think we're going to have an episode where we have guys in their 20s come in here and talk about what's it look like to, achieve your dreams in Indianapolis and what's that look like on a daily grind kind of for you. And there could be a version of somebody, that's got a lot of experience. I think there's lots of different variations of it, but Jackson and I see it the same way.
To put that in perspective, it seems like both of your fathers honored God in the grind. They lay minister, vocational pastor, dairyman, veterinarian, etc. What has changed, do you think, for your generation, if anything, about what that grind really consists of? Are things truly different than how you experienced them in their raising you and living that God in the grind out? And just to help us sort of think, are things the same or are they different as we try to encourage each other to live in the grind with the Lord?
Yeah, it's so good of a question. Is deep because I think in some ways it is the same. And in other ways, the rate of change in our world and how when we became professionals, it feels like there's just a constant measuring stick. And I think some of that is made up and becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy of what we think we should be doing. And living in that headspace is almost immobilizing because this line, it probably came at the tail end of my Springbuk chapter. So that would have been like 2018 to 2020. I would have been 28 to 30 years old. And, this comparison is the thief of joy. It just felt like it was seared in my soul. And then an encouragement that felt so life-giving from a dear mentor. He said, nothing is wasted. And it was both this reality that like, when I am comparing myself in the grind, it's always like what I don't have. And I think it's really hard to be grateful. Instead, you're almost inviting the anxiety of what you don't have. And I love your take on gratitude, Greg. It'd be awesome to hear that again. Every time I hear it, I just get encouraged in the gospel. But with that, if you're always comparing, I think that's what makes it harder. I don't think my dad was really worried about this, that, or the next thing. I think he was kind of focused in. And also, I think my dad, just from like providing, a big part of his world wasn't anything more complicated than just trying to really take care of who he was serving through his work and then also our family. It wasn't some massive, grandiose thing. I think he had a bigger picture, but that was it. Right. And I think for me, the nothing is wasted piece, just to layer that back in, is that it just gave me this confidence that I'm seeing through the glass darkly now. I don't really know how everything in my career is going to come full circle, but in a way, I don't have to take everyone's cream that's rising to the top, love a good dairy analogy, and be like, hey, this is the best of your
Got a
world
couple so far.
yeah, right. This is the best of your world, and I'm just going to apply that to mine. And if my best isn't measuring your best, it's like you're almost like building that off of scaffolding. It's not solid, It's really an impossible comparison, but you're making that comparison anyway. And coming from venture and tech, the headlines reinforce that. It's like this much money raised, or this young founder that's doing all these things, and
right.
In some ways that I would want to like spit that out and be like, man, that's the only thing that's being celebrated. What about all the horror stories? Yeah. And then in other ways, it's like, man, I want that so much. Yeah. And like that, like, I don't know. Yeah. So that's my answer to that.
No, that's good. True. Cabbage onto that.
I think, so just background on, like, my dad was in the ministry, and I think has always really been a prophetic person. Mm-hmm. Asks the hardest questions of anybody that I know. And I'm not being biased. I think people would say the same. I mean, and to the degree where it's like almost difficult to be like in the daily life, because there's like a lot of big picture questions. And I think that's been a huge blessing for me to like really look at the Bible and really seek through like what's actually being talked about here by Jesus. How does that actually apply to like the reality of life today in a broader macro level, which sometimes is really hard for people to understand. So I'm thankful for that. He would probably even say that he wasn't the best example from like a practitioner worker. Like I didn't learn necessarily like habits of like time management or like money management or things like that. I was very thankful to have a grandpa. My mom's dad lived in Los Angeles. So my small town Indiana childhood would be the majority of my life, but then I'd get the chance to go vacation with my grandpa in LA on his country club and get exposure and access and that kind of like almost like motivation, or, I had a vision for like, hey, if I want to go be successful, these are some of the things that I could visualize, right? And I think that was really incredible to get the chance to learn. He owned an insurance business. And so having that balance of two different kinds of like a really kind of a spiritual father, if you will, or like educational, and then I had like the hard worker kind of like, so that combination really has led to a lot of who I am. And I think for me, like, it's hard to decide like what's different about what they did versus what I'm doing. My only observation probably is that like, because of the remote life that most people that I know have,
right?
There's like, how do we do a good job of prioritizing and like being a servant in multiple categories, and also find time to like be a leader in communities that we want to be involved with. I think that's probably the biggest challenge versus being, I don't want to make it maybe like one-dimensional or two-dimensional from, our dad's generations, right? Where there was as many distractions potentially. I think that's really good. We want to learn your lessons as you're learning along that journey about how to prioritize in this different tech sphere that we operate in. Yeah.
And how alienated we're becoming socially because of a lot of remote work and things get delivered instead of having to go out and get them.
Right.
Waiting in line used to be a place where you can meet people.
Yeah.
Well, now we hate waiting in line. So we get DoorDash to bring it to us right away. Spangle.
Yeah, I think in answer to your question, one thing that's come out in the episodes is fatherhood. Millennial men, I think, have more pressure, obligations, desire, maybe than my dad's generation, to be involved with the kid. Like my dad built a great business, very successful, but that meant he missed a lot of games. He wasn't there at bedtime. Millennial men, I think it was like 4 times more time with their kids than previous generations. And one thing that I think has come out in the podcast is like, all right, my desire to be a builder, an employee, an executive is equal to my desire to be a good dad.
Definitely.
Right. And I don't know if that was the mentality of your generation, but I know in our generation, there's a lot more expectations from wives, friends, church to be engaged in the home in a way that I didn't see in my household growing up. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's a great observation and one that I feel. And I think just to piggyback on that point, Chris, it's one that I think even with Honor God in the Grind, we're coming from it at this point of like, we're in the journey and we have not arrived at all.
The three of us all have young kids.
Yeah, it's very relatable. And the people that we're speaking to, I think everything can be applied wherever you are. But to Drew's point about having some people in their 20s just breaking into their career who likely want to be dads, but it's like we're speaking to them when we can relate to them a decade ago and it still feels fresh. And then also the people that the dads and fathers that are also trying to be very excellent and faithful in business, but also have a lot going on at home. And it's different when you had no kids and you could just run super hard in your early 20s with like not as much to worry about. So I guess to kind of come back to that point about being aware is I feel like I'm on that journey right now. And I think I'm even dialing in basic things that seem like I should have already accomplished. Like, all right, locking in. This is my habitual wake up routine so that I can get up earlier so that I can then stop my day at a point where it doesn't just overflow and like take away the 2 hours that I have with my kids. And I think my wife, her dad was just such an incredible example too of he really wanted to be available and accessible and create a life design that allowed him to be that for his 3 girls. And I think that has kind of been an aspiration, inspiration as well, where my dad was so invested in, you know, trying to keep his nose to the grindstone and we were with him, but it was usually through work that we were with him or alongside him in work. Whereas my wife's father, incredible guy, he would create space and like that was the main event, you know, let's go hang out in the hot tub, so to speak, and just talk, you know.
COVID really seemed to change a lot of that. Like the work from home era after COVID seemed to give us a taste. Like I want more of this.
Of like the life design and just rethinking.
Kind of like your
lives.
Wife's dad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of rewrote the playbook of what were all the norms.
Yeah.
Which can be a blessing and a curse to your point about structure and not being around any people and just door dashing food. But what would you say, Drew, from your view as father and balancing that with the grind and also like Chris saying 4 times more millennials want to spend 4 times more time?
Yeah. I mean, the observations from all the podcasts and conversations we've had is that a lot of the themes are similar to Chris's point. Like getting up early was one that came up a lot because there's not going to be a lot of times throughout the day where you have like your me time, you know, for most dads or workers, you could say have that challenge. So they have to get up early, whether it's going for a walk, for a run, a workout, get their Bible time. And then really just being selfless with the rest of their day, which is hard to do, but it's really kind of like the guys that I think we look up to do that really well. But the radical change for my definition of success or definition or identity, if you will, did kind of happen around this time of like being a dad where we had 2 kids under 2, COVID just happened. And then I was also working remote for the first time and I was in a startup that was really struggling. Like I'm thankful that they kept me on the team during the pandemic because we didn't sell anything for 18 months.
Right.
And before that, you know, when I was really kind of on a hustle, like, you know, top performer kind of salesperson. And so that all of that at once really kind of led to radical change in journaling. And I think I've talked about it on the other episodes, but it's like that led to this whole topic we're talking about today. I think I needed that and God had a lot of mercy on me and was really patient with me throughout that process. And that's
so
really
that right there also is a part of the grind that you said love. And then I think you've also built on that more to talk about like testimony and anchored in that is vulnerability. And I think even embedded in that whole paradigm and what you just said with the startup, it's like there's a magnetism and honesty that when we don't have our stuff all together and we're in the valley, like we should shed some light on those things too in a way, because it's easy to, you know, have the highlight reel, but it doesn't, the real doesn't always look real, right?
For sure. I mean, we need those kind of like desert moments, right? Preparing like Jesus was preparing in the desert, like with the temptation for 40 days. Like he needed that before he like took his glory. I mean, for us, like for me, I guess that was my example. I remember having a kind of housewarming party for a house we built, and it was a tweener house that we needed. Like it was August 2019 we moved in, and actually it was a huge blessing. I could not imagine living in our 800 square foot bungalow in Broderpool during COVID with 2 kids. So we had to move to a tweener house, and we were so happy. It was like, wow, we've got our kids have a bedroom, and it was like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but like I was just really excited. I remember actually breaking down crying at the home welcoming because I was so afraid to mess it up. I was like, I'm starting to achieve the dreams that I really wanted. And even since then, I've achieved more from a standpoint of having 3 kids. We live in Zionsville. We have a wonderful community. But at that point, I think I was just like really afraid of like messing it up or screwing it up. How can I be in this situation? Like, I don't even know if I deserve this. Like, there's some of those questions that led to like, God, come on. I want to feel your love. I want to feel your presence because I know that you're here, and we're going to like continue to work through this. And I think those are, I mean, if somebody got coffee with me during that time period, they're probably like, dude, this guy is like, what's going on? He's talking about lots of stuff. And I know there's people out there who have had that situation with me because I think that's where I'm just transparent. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference to me.
You just described my first 2 years of marriage too. I mean, and Jeremy Pryor, our last guest, I mean, his work was hugely influential in Citizen 7. Like, I don't know. That's what's so powerful about this group is just, I was in that position where I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how you expect me to do this. But then being in community with other guys who have done it, who, sitting in here every month, listening to guys who are, 20, 30, 40 years down the road and like, oh, you were in the same position. You figured it out. Okay, I can do that. Like,
well, you guys have set the stage so nicely for the last thread I want to pull. You mentioned the other script, we need to get real. The notion of friendship in the grind, being able to be authentic and vulnerable with the ugly stuff, with the hard stuff. But you guys are operating life, by and large, if I can understand properly, in different circles. You work for different companies. You're married to different people and have different children, right? You have different churches. Yeah. You have different. What's it like to be a friend in this day and age? A friendship that can be there, present for you when you're going through the grind. You mentioned Jesus and the temptation in the desert. Remember what God did to bless Jesus with a friend? He brought his angels to minister to him. God brings friends.
Yep.
Okay. I want to really pull on this thread for our audience here is what's it like to, in the desert, even Jesus himself, God knew that he needed ministering angels in his life. What's friendship like and how do we pursue that? So even though our time may be spent in different places, as you two guys' lifestyles are, there is some overlap there, but you're still friends and your friendship is growing. Tell us more about that.
Still figuring it out, but I'll share one thing that's been on my mind just from a biblical narrative and then take a crack at a quick thought. But to your point, Greg, I think community, which is like maybe a broader sense of knowing you're not alone, is super important. And you illustrated that with talking about Citizen 7, Chris. I think friendship is taking like the 50 to 100 people that maybe think the same way. And then the friendship is like, you have to have some depth there of people that can truly like know you and go deeper with. And like when we talked about vulnerability, yes, that's very important, but you also don't just want to blast out anything and everything to whoever, right? I mean, when you have friendship, those are people that can carry that weight and see you. There's a story that I was, just listening to recently about Elijah, right? And he's doing the mountaintop moment and challenging all the Baal worshipers and then from that point on, God burns up the altar that's covered in water and shows he's God. There's a lot more to that story, but the crazy thing is when Jezebel says, hey, coming after you, we're going to get you. And he goes and runs. And then he's like underneath this broom tree. Right. And the crazy thing that I want to get to is that he's like, God, I'm the only one. I've served you so faithfully. I'm it. Yeah. And God's like, hey, he doesn't like beat him up. He actually encourages him. He gives him food. He provides for him physically, which is also a model of friendship in a way, God being that to Elijah. And then he says, I have 7,000 other people who have never bowed their knee to Baal. And I think so often we think we are the only one. I know even you and Don thought like, oh, like C.S. Lewis, the quote, oh, me too, you too. Like I was on that island. I think to answer your question more succinctly from my standpoint, I have not always had that. And I think even to that vein of a deeper core friendship, I've been praying for like that David-Jonathan bond of someone that I could really have that like knows me on a deeper level that is kind of like enabling me to be a better husband, to be a better father. But those are like very special.
Yes.
So in a way, there's like the friendship piece that is deeper than the community. And then there's like a David-Jonathan level. And I'm still on that road, I guess, just to be truthful.
Yes.
But I think what really enables that is you have to put yourself out there. You have to invest in that. And you can't just expect things to be handed to you on a silver platter. And just like as with our kids, they say that love is spelled Time. I think with friendships, you have to invest, you have to initiate, you have to lead with vulnerability. All of those things are ingredients to that. I'm not saying I have baked the cake in my life. I just feel like it's a really tough nut to crack. And you may like swing and miss in some of those that it's not just perfect. So like, that's like the hard truth is that it may not happen overnight. And you may have a few pieces where it's like, it feels harder than it should be.
Yeah. Maybe a few rejections along the way and all kinds of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Rejection. Like I would say being okay with rejection, I mean, is part of like the relationship building process. Like actually, that's a weird thing to think about, but this is a really bad joke, but ever since I met my wife in 2012, like all I've been doing is trying to meet new guys, right? So like, so I've thought through like, okay, what's the strategy of like, how should we connect and that kind of thing. And Edge mentoring, when that was a big, I just was literally sending LinkedIn messages to guys that I knew were in Edge, be like, hey bro, you want to get coffee? And like, some people were like, no, but some people said yes. I actually think there probably was like hundreds that people have met through that whole journey, like legitimately. And I, that was part of this being like, hey, let's get connected. Like that really matters a lot to me. The more I'm thinking about it, like being a remote worker is probably not what I should be doing. I really am open-minded about what God could do next in my life. Because of that, I want to be more with people, but, the rejection process is being okay with that. And also just being yourself wherever you are, being a fully integrated person, no matter what. Like, I remember my wife would be like, you're not like, you don't talk like that. Like if I was like talking about work, like we call it like talking shop, right? Like don't talk shop and then talk differently. Like, I think that's what I've learned over time is just being the same kind of, and I think people would agree, like just the same dude everywhere you are.
Yeah.
And customers that I work with in my, career, I think like that too. It's just, that's something I'm really proud of, but also that's something that people notice if they want to be friends with you or not. Like this guy, you want to know what to expect from someone you want to spend time with. I think that's, we moved to Zionsville 4 years ago and I've been just blown away by the community. I think that's why people like living there. People are really invested and committed to it. And we go to Traders Point Church, which at one time when we first started going like 10 years ago, felt like a really big church, which it is, but like it's not to us anymore. Right. I think it's really felt,
even though it's gotten bigger, it
has, but it's so like true. My wife serves in the kids ministry every weekend. I've done various volunteering. We got 3 kids that are, we just see people and talk to people, and it's just, and then even our neighborhood, we have, I think, let's just say 80 houses in our neighborhood. There's 8 families, which is 10% of the neighborhood, that all hang out all the time. Every day, it feels like, that all go to Traders Point together. And there's even a couple sprinkled in around us that still go, like, so we try to really, really tight community. I think between the 8 families, there's like 20 kids or something. So that's been an opportunity. And one of the practical ways, I think, to create friendship in a way that's really authentic is something that Don actually taught me, which was basically 5 questions, and you had to respond back immediately with one word, like almost like your impulse reaction to each word. And it was like emotionally, relationally, physically, and spiritually. I think you're missing one, but basically you had to respond back. Like, how are you feeling about what those categories right now? And when we do that as a group of guys, like there's usually like 4 or 5 of us like that will respond back. There's probably one area that you realized you were not doing a good enough job of, or what we realized, and we're all very gentle and empathetic about it. But it's like we do have a follow-up question, right? Like I noticed that like everything was going well except for spiritually. You paused for a long time. You know what I mean? Something's going to fall flat soon if you don't get that. You know, we want to like have that kind of conversation. I like giving people a hard time about physical because I want people to work out with me, but everybody's busy. But
you know, those 5 questions, it's not a test. You can't fail.
Exactly. It's just what it is. What it is.
What it is.
That's right.
And that's the way friendship is. You can't fail.
And it's hard to answer those questions in a community or a group. I wouldn't recommend a large group,
Right.
but
No.
What was surprising, one time we did it as couples. So there was like 6 of us, 3 couples, I think. And it was a really cool opportunity even for me to answer those questions in a public with my wife. Right. And it was like really good in a positive way. Kind of felt like we were
some good accountability there.
Yeah.
Tell us where you want to go forward with God in the Grind, with your lives, with Indianapolis, with Jesus, you mentioned you have something with Marcus Hall. Okay. Another Edge guy. I may have met him through Edge. I'm not sure.
I need to check my phone really quick, but we were going to promote that here at the end.
But bring us home with sort of what your future looks like, what you'd like us to be, and how others in the community can support what God's laid on your life and calling.
What do you think?
Yeah, I can tee it up and you can slam it home. I think with Honor God in the Grind, we're trying to create a conversation where people in their 20s can maybe see the few steps in front of them. People in their 30s can really feel that, you know, they're in the thick of it and they're not alone. And then people across the entire equation of work can be encouraged, fortified, and even give back to, you know, people that have been in those seats not too long ago. And I think the beauty of even what this is, there's a little bit of a loose structure and it can take a lot of forms and fashions, but the podcast is just a way to get into the story. The events is a way to get into the community. And so Honor God in the Grind is both an event and podcast combo. And we haven't really said, hey, this is going to go forever, but as long as there's value, we want to keep seeing it through. And, you know, even this September, we have a pretty cool opportunity to build community and get into the story. So it's the both and.
Yep. We've had a lunch meetup as well. So I think that was,
exactly.
I think we've done like a really cool opportunity. It's Indianapolis specifically, which I know is an obvious thing, but that's also really helpful to be like, hey, you can listen to a lot of podcasts. You can do a lot of different things at your time, but like this is an Indianapolis brotherhood community, no agenda, nothing attached to it other than just like making each other better. That's literally it, becoming a loving community. And where else can you get something like that, right? We don't have any commercials. We don't have any, like you're going to meet people in this when we go to an event. We have an event on September 2nd. And then we're also going to do more lunch meetups. I think that we will continue to improve. I do think there's a lot of people on our minds that we could bring in here and just have a conversation and continue to have that story, if you will. But like I've got one example could be an opportunity to serve as a team in November, like around Thanksgiving time. I think just implementing just ways to honor God in the grind practically, but also just being open about what that actually means to each other. And I think at the lunch meetup, we had 8 guys I've never met before, that I've never seen before in my life. And we all just showed up and they were just like, oh yeah, we just asking different questions. And I think that's what it's for. But I think that's the answer to the question. That's what it looks like. But
Well, anything we can do, we want to propel you forward. You know, Spangle, through his podcasting enterprise, has always thought to build this thesis out that that's how community can be created through technology such as podcasts. And,
it's inherently communal.
Right.
It's 2 friends getting together to talk about something they're nerdy about intentionally and build something out and then invite people to come and be a part of it. That's the genesis of all of this. So
what would you say in closing? And then I'm going to ask you for your last sort of charge or mandate or any comments you want to close with. But for old guys like Don and I, you know, don't ask us 5 questions. We can't get beyond 1 or 2. But what would you share with the older generation here that might help to what you're feeling and sensing?
I think the word that comes to mind for what I think Indianapolis needs is just be more fearless. I really feel like we all have this Midwestern, like, I don't want to do much. Even at church, it's kind of like we probably could be a little bit more excited that we're at church. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a little bit of like I'm holding back kind of like attitude of, I don't want to look too showy. I don't want to have this like extra swagger. I don't really know. Right. It's like, and then even just like the jobs and career opportunities. And then, you know, I joke around about this with people. It's like, who lives in these huge houses? Like, I don't know what people do. And what is everybody doing? Because there's Lily and there's the government and then there's a bunch of small companies. It's kind of hard to figure out like what the landscape is, the economic landscape. I don't know what people do. Yeah. It's like, I don't see anybody going downtown to the office. So it's kind of hard to figure out like, what am I missing from I think we're all aspirational. We all want to make an impact. And it's like, you know, I remember going to the first Citizen 7 event. It was Bob and the like Wabash boys getting up there talking about how they've been friends for 60 years and brought in Victory Field and brought in Lucas Oil Stadium and had deals with the governor and had deals with the mayor and had the lawyer. It's like, I don't even know where to start with that because
that's good.
It's like, I'm not mingling with those kinds of people, even though that sounds really interesting. And like, they built something, right? And it's almost like, okay, they're getting ready to hand it off to, you know, guys like Jackson.
That's right.
I want to do that, but I don't know how to do that. You know, I think that's something that I would raise up is like, how do we help the next generation be more fearless? Because we have a hand to be held.
That's really good. Especially I'm sensing a lot of I'm a victim of what's happening. I can't really thrive and flourish because things are being done to me. And we need to move beyond that to know we can be confident.
Exactly.
Fearless there. So we're taking strong note of that. Jackson, any thought?
Yeah, I love that baton handoff with all of the assets that someone that's sitting in your seat has, Greg, from like a relational equity standpoint and other things. I think the one that came to mind was almost the gift of encouragement when people have had reps, like people like you, Greg, when you can beat up an idea or talk shop on like a business, when you can lean in with myself or Drew and like truly just say like, maybe it's not, but like if there's an authentic way of like, yes, keep going, it means a lot more, you know, when you can get a little closer view than just like the broader, like, hey, how are you? Great. You know, get to know someone. That's just like a 30,000 introductory level.
Right.
But if you can cut down and like talk shop and actually have something that you can connect on. And then when there's like a motivational piece of like, keep going. Hey, you're kind of on it. But then a quarter twist of here are some things to think on. Man, that's like wind in the sails. So I think like just, you know, there's a lot of avenues that I feel like, you know, for whatever reason that like crossover piece can be broken of how to ask for help, how to give help, how to like carry the baton forward to plug into like these causes that people care about, or like, hey, I don't want to lift that weight anymore, but I still care about the cause. So anyway, that middle piece is like, there's something there.
Well, thank you. Those are both beautiful charges. That's one reason why Don and I, praise God, have hired Keegan White to help us engage.
Let's go.
To bring older and younger, to bring black, white, and brown, to bring different denominations together, to be more than 30,000 foot friends, but to be authentic and especially intergenerationally for those that have cut their teeth, say, hey, here's some things you need to really consider, Harley. So pray for us. We're praying for you. Thank you. This conversation has really encouraged me. Do we have any questions?
We did not.
Okay.
No.
So Chris, take us home.
All right. Thanks so much for watching or listening to Big Hearted Indy. Just a reminder, you can join us live on Zoom every last Monday of the month. Thank you all for adjusting to my schedule. I appreciate it. And so that's why this is the first Monday of the month. But join us live, ask questions, and then you can catch it a week or two later in the podcast feed or on the YouTube channel. If you want to catch up on Honor God in the Grind, you can go back and listen to those episodes in this same exact podcast feed. So just go check out. It has different cover art, different name, title different, but the one with Jeremy Pryor I thought was tremendous. Listen to that one. Check out the first one. So thanks so much for joining us here on Big Hearted Indy. Please go to citizen7indy.com, the number 7, citizen7indy.com, and you can sign up for all the events that are coming up in the fall. Our July respite is over, and there's a lot that is about to happen, like the Speed City panel and others. So please join the email newsletter and find out about everything that's going on. And
Speed City's coming. We'll see Drew with his Speed City shirt on.
I
do want to tell. I know now where Drew got his his experience in California with Grandpa. Well, Jackson has the cool. That's right. Everyone needs some California cool.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you again next month on Big Hearted Indy.